Hi, my name's Alicia Blaylock, and I decided to do this project on Aaron Douglas, who's the father of Black American art. Aaron Douglas was an American artist and visual arts educator. He painted and illustrated on a variety of mediums, including murals. He was one of the biggest major figures in the Harlem Renaissance, or also known as the New Negro Movement. He was known for painting murals and creating illustrations that addressed social issues around race and segregation in the United States by utilizing African-centric imagery. Aaron Douglas is now considered the foremost visual artist of the Harlem Renaissance. Here are some of his beautiful pieces. Here's a self-portrait of Aaron Douglas that he did in 1954. Aaron Douglas was born in Topeka, Kansas in 1899 and died in Nashville, Tennessee in 1979. He was known for being one of the first African American artists to create racial themes using modern art. He pursued justice through his paintbrush, which still to this day continues to influence artists. After earning a BFA degree from the University of Nebraska and teaching at Lincoln High School in Kansas City, Douglas moved to New York in 1925, where he joined the cultural movement known as the Harlem Renaissance or New Negro Movement. This movement was a group of young artists which featured musicians, writers, playwrights, and artists in Harlem who all worked together to bridge the gap between the white world and African Americans. Douglas was found to be a powerful voice of insight and opposition. In addition to his personal art, he illustrated articles on political topics including segregation, lynching, and human rights for Crisis and Opportunity magazines, founded by the NAACP and the Urban League. Douglas believed in the power of education. He saw this as a vehicle for positive change in African American life. He began teaching at a historically black university in Nashville named Fisk University in 1938, where he actually founded the art department there. In 1963, he was invited by President John F. Kennedy to attend the celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation. He earned an honorary doctorate from Fisk University in 1973 after his retirement from the school just 7 years after. He taught there for almost 30 years, training new generations of African American artists. Most of the art Aaron Douglas created was from the 1920s through the 1940s, with the 1930s being his most influential years. He has been influencing generations since. Some of the events happening at the time Aaron Douglas lived was that the Wright brothers succeeded in the first sustained and manned plane flight, taking man into the age of flight. The Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America was formed. The first telephone conversation occurred. The end of World War I. In 1920, women were given the right to vote. The Great Depression also happened, and also it was the era of Babe Ruth. World War II started and ended during his time. In 1943, race riots in Detroit and Harlem caused 40 deaths and 700 injuries. The NBA and MLB are formed and founded. Pictured here is Jackie Robinson, who broke the Major League Baseball's barrier against colored players when he first debuted for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Also the invention of the color TV. And also pictured here is Martin Luther King, who was part of the civil rights movement that occurred during this time, including Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, and also the end of segregation. American astronauts landed on the moon. In 1965, the Watts race riots in LA began a 5-day siege, culminating in the death of 34 people and property destruction in excess of $2 million. Other art movements happening at the time were Expressionism, which you can see here in the upper left-hand corner is some art, which was the movement characterized for the interest in depicting emotion rather than objection. There was also Cubism going on. In the lower left-hand corner is a piece of art. That art movement was started by Picasso and Barque. It is characterized for the fragmentation of figures, abstraction, sharp angles, and shallow space, as you see here in this art. Then we also have Futurism, which was happening, and examples in the middle. That movement began in Italy before World War I. Artists valued innovation and categorically rejected the art of the past. They embraced technology and found beauty in the phenomenon of speed and the automobile. And then we have Realism here in the upper left-hand corner. That was a movement that gained momentum in New York at the turn of the century. Artists sought to depict the reality of their experience and modern life in the city. There was also Surrealism. In the lower right-hand corner is a beautiful example. This was a literary and artistic movement. It emerged in France in the 1930s. Artists were interested in the exploration of the unconscious mind, dreams, free association, automatism, and hypnotic trances. In addition to these listed here, there was also Muralism, which is a movement started by Mexican artists in the 1930s. It shows a combination of indigenous themes and traditions with modernist and Renaissance techniques of mural painting. It's often characterized for its political and socialist subject matter. Theories on Aaron Douglas's art. Douglas liked to create African subjects inspired by Cubism, using bold graphic style. He also uses the rhythms of jazz in his pieces, adding an additional element of African American culture. Flattening his figures to two-dimensional silhouettes and generalizing their form to be generic men and women, Douglas created imagery that celebrated African and African American themes in terms that were universal and integrative. He employed his style across a range of different media, including painting, illustration, murals, and prints. You see that Douglas often worked with a narrow range of cool colors, using compositional elements and shapes that, like concentric circles and radiating beams, to create dramatic focal points and dynamic movement. These abstract elements enhance the narratives of his paintings to make them even more emotionally impactful. The two movements that Aaron Douglas was a part of was the Harlem Renaissance and also social realism. Social realism was a movement that gained momentum in New York at the turn of the century. Artists sought to depict the reality of their experiences and modern life in the city. Summary of the body of work by Aaron Douglas vividly captured the spirit of his time in this Harlem Renaissance by combining Cubist Angler rhythms and his captivating Art Deco diagnasium and traditional African and African American imagery. He was innovative in creating a new visual vocabulary that evoked both current realities and hopes for a better future. He left his mark on earth by his forceful ideas, and their distinctive artistic form produced the most powerful legacy of the Harlem Renaissance. Remembering his initial impressions of Harlem, Aaron Douglas said, "There are so many things that I had seen for the first time, so many impressions I was getting. One was that of seeing a big city that was entirely black. From beginning to end, you were impressed by the fact that black people were in charge of things. And here was a black city, and here was a situation that was eventually to be the center for the great in American culture." Douglas said that in an interview in 1971 to Leslie Collins, who was a professor of English. The main elements and principles of design Aaron Douglas used were two-dimensional, lines, shapes, mostly cool colors. Mass in 2 dimensions implied death, implied motion, silhouetted figures, and overlapping forms. Symmetry and balance, pattern, emphasis on focal point, which you clearly see in his art, repetition and rhythm, influenced by European abstraction, Art Deco, and African masks. Aaron Douglas, I believe, used 3 of the 6 art functions, which were art for commemoration, definitely art as commentary, and art as self-expression. Art criticism. I found the criticism that he received was contextual and formal. In regards to this piece he did here, which is entitled Let My People Go, a chairman of the Metropolitan Art Department says, "The appearance in our galleries of the beautiful and profound Let My People Go is not only transformative, but also in a quite natural way, given the museum's close proximity to Douglas's adoptive home of Harlan. The exceptional opportunity to acquire this important work allows us to reveal to our visitors more and richer facets of modern art in the United States. Additionally, it builds on the department's recent major gifts from the Souls Grown Deep Foundation of works by African American artists of the South." I would definitely agree with her criticism. In regards to the formal criticism, again, the same piece was criticized. Rendered in an unusual palette of lavender and yellow gold, it depicts a narrative in the book of Exodus concerning God's order to Moses to lead the Israelites out of captivity in Egypt. Divine light radiates out of the composition's upper left corner in the concentric arcs, down to the kneeling figure of Moses near the opposite corner. The 3 great pyramids of Giza appear behind Moses as small accumulations of vertical marks suggest the masses of enslaved Israelites awaiting freedom. The Pharaoh's regiments gather for battle along the left side, filled with stylized waves which may allude to Moses' parting of the Red Sea. Let My People Go exemplifies the artist's appropriation of historical narratives as allegories relating to African American experience and identity. And for my works cited, I used Wikipedia, biography.com for the Aaron Douglas biography, the National Gallery of Art chronologically, Aaron Douglas, African American Modernism, Americans Best History.com, Prezi.com, theartstory.org, and aarondouglas.ku.edu. I hope you enjoyed my presentation and learned a little bit more about this great African American artist. Thanks for watching.